Welcome back. I hope you all had a wonderful time in those breakout sessions. I know I did. I'm really excited about what we've been able to do together here today. I want to leave you all with a couple remarks, a couple ideas, things to think about, not only about the work of BBIF, but about the environment and the work that we're all in right now. As a Black business person, I know that it means that I am significantly more focused now on how to leverage the urgency of my identity into the power of the work that is ahead of me. I know that what the limitations are of diversity, equity, inclusion, as we've heard this terminology so much over the last year, that's not quite enough for what we actually need. And for a boy from Chicago, growing up in a lower income neighborhood called North Lawndale, where if any of you all have ever read Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Case for Reparations, you know a bit about my neighborhood because he came to my community to find out why America had a case for reparations. It is the urgency, it is the fire beneath me that makes me want to do even more and to keep going in this work. What does equity mean, however, as an individual act versus as a societal response? We all know that it's no one person's individual job to ensure that economic justice, that financial empowerment, that CDFIs and community banks and organizations that support them are all individual actors. We know that we're caught in what Dr. King called the network of inescapable mutuality, that we all affect one another. And so we have to move from an individual response, from an individual organizational response, from an individual desire for change into a collective and societal one. And I know that's part of what we're here today to better understand, and it's part of what I hope you all expect to do the moment you leave today. We have to have a systems-focused strategy for financial change, for economic opportunity, for uplifting and empowering and repairing and restoring what is possible for Black communities. But how do we maintain traction towards racial equity and justice when some people don't even want to call it racism? Some people don't want to acknowledge that equity is even not in our system today. Some people don't want to hear any more conversations about race. They say that that's just talking more about politics. And this isn't about politics. What we're talking about is banking. This isn't about racism. What we're talking about is community development. This isn't about race and equity. This is about philanthropy. We're not talking about trying to stop white supremacy. We're just trying to talk about charity. How do we move forward when we have so many people stalling progress? And we know that everyone agrees with the direction, right? We've all heard it, right? No, I think that everyone should be treated equal. I think that, all people are equal. I don't see color. We've all heard this. And we know that, as Common said in the song, justice for all just ain't specific enough. We know that where harm is specific, the solution must be as well. We know that where we talk about, well, we need all boats to rise, we need to pay attention to the fact that only some boats have been sinking. And so how do we get specific about this work of equity? I think first it starts with accountability. It starts with understanding that we all have an accountability not only to one another in this time, but a responsibility to leverage our power and our privileges to repair what was lost because of time. We shouldn't be promoting ourselves to the roles of gatekeepers. We should remember that our responsibility in this world is to be gate smashers. There shouldn't even be a gate. There shouldn't be a barrier between the haves and the have-nots. When I think about my Bible, and I'm not sure how y'all pray, and I leave it up to you all to who you believe in, but as for me and my house, I remember what it means when my Bible says the poor will always be with you. And I have to think about, what is it in the human heart that creates an eternal poverty? It's the fact that we're not together. Not really. Some of us may say, I agree with your direction, but like Dr. King says, yeah, but you don't agree with the degree of work that's required, and you certainly don't agree with the pace that I'm asking you to take towards equity. And that's what we need to start sustaining. We need to be super specific about what we mean when we say degrees of change, what we mean when we say progress, what equity entails. It's not the same as equality. Equality assumes that we all start in the same place, but equity requires that we acknowledge that some harm has been specific. And so the solutions must be as well. George Floyd didn't have to die last year, y'all. George Floyd could have been with us right now. Breonna Taylor could have been with us, but unfortunately, we live in a country where people learn about the need for racial equity through the spilling of Black blood. And I wish George Floyd was enough to teach America. I don't think it was. I don't think he was enough. Because I thought Mike Brown might have been enough, but he wasn't enough. I thought Rodney King getting beaten in LA was going to be enough, but he wasn't enough. I thought Dr. King being assassinated down in Memphis, Tennessee would be enough, but he wasn't enough not to teach this country. I thought what Frederick Douglass wrote and said and talked about as a freed slave was going to be enough, but that wasn't enough. We have to turn this around so that our blood is not their classroom. So that we are not the sacrifice for someone else's learning or their ability to accept that we exist as we do. And so economic power and empowerment then requires not only that we get aligned on our language, that we get aligned on our pace, that we get aligned on our direction, but also that we get aligned on our solidarity. Now, you all know what happens when we come together as one. Black and brown people, white allies, indigenous people. We know what can happen when a nation rises up. We saw that in 2020 when all 50 states stood up and said Black Lives Matter. We know what can happen. Now, how do we sustain it? How have we seen Black people's solidarity at the state or the local level moving us all forward nationally? There's ways to advance this, y'all. There's definitely ways to advance it. One of them, is the Reverse the Red project that BBIF is really championing right now, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Another one is looking at the model that people like Stacey Abrams provided all of us and her incredible drive for voter protections and turnout. It's looking at what happened when there were equity carves out in round 2 for the payroll protection program, but they weren't in round 1, but it only happened in round 2 because we saw the data of who actually got that support that Congress mandated for all businesses, but the vast majority didn't help Black and brown businesses. And it took Black and brown people coming together to go to Washington, to make the case and to ensure that there were carve-outs, that there was equity in round 2. We saw that happening when we came together as financial leaders in this country. We know that there's a push now for Black venture capital investors and funds. I think about what the young man John Henry's doing out in New York with Harlem Capital. I think about what Tristan over at the company Bevel, formerly from Google, what he's been doing around VCs. I'm looking at us starting to organize both the traditional and non-traditional, the institutional and non-institutional funding opportunities to promote, sustain, and empower and endure Black businesses. I love seeing it. These are ways that we came together in 2020. I think about what bail reform means when we know that, for instance, companies like Walgreens or others who have, these jobs that pay less than $20 an hour, the majority of people in jail right now are people who make less than $20 an hour. And though the companies may not see it as important, it is important to know that as they're trying to diversify their talent pipelines, they might want to go look in the jail. And the bail reform isn't a political conversation. It's a human conversation. As someone from Chicago, I got so excited because, in 2020, at the end of the year, and then coming into early January, we were able to celebrate because after years and years and years of protesting and calling and advocating, I don't know how many speeches I made about it and how many letters I wrote and how many witness slips I sent to our local legislature down in Springfield, Illinois, but we finally got it passed to eliminate cash bail. We're the only state right now in the country that was able to pass that, but I know that that is a beacon of hope. Because the people who won't be in jail might be in a job. We know that when you jail a Black mother, you jail a Black family. And so the solidarity and the work that we came together to advance in 2020 allows for the future that we now get to build for ourselves. We know that it's important to own the means of production. It's not important just to look for charity. It's important to own the means that produce the ability to even be charitable. When I think about what D Nice was, y'all know some of y'all probably went to Club Quarantine during the shutdown. Y'all probably turned on your Instagram and you saw what D Nice was able to do when he had over 100,000 people across the world. Michelle Obama is at the club with the everyday person on Instagram because we were all sitting in our homes and a Black man decided to play some music for all of us. And that has spawned and turned into so many different new economic opportunities for people of color. We saw what Tyler Perry did when he bought an entire swath of land and opened up the first Black-owned movie production studio. We saw what Kev on Stage did when all of the comedians were shut down and nobody could go into any of these restaurants or stand-up comedy clubs and these sorts of things. And Kev on Stage decided, not only are we going to launch some things online and do some social media work as entrepreneurs, but we're going to get some money, we're going to get some support, and we're going to open up our own studio to produce this stuff ourselves because we're not going to wait for Netflix. Y'all see what I'm talking about? We need to remember that we're not overcoming, and Black people are not progressing despite our race. We're doing it because of who we are. And on the flip side, it's not necessarily just because of America that we have opportunities. It's in spite of America in some ways that we've had to fight for opportunities. This is where we stand. This is what BBIF is about at the intersection of these points. Now, last year was a hurricane. And I know some people want to move fast. Some people want to really get moving. Let's leverage these opportunities. And I agree with you. But I also know that sometimes you got to take stock of where you're at. Sometimes you got to listen and discern to see what's coming on the basis of what has happened here. And for all of those of y'all who might be over the age of 30 or such, you probably know that wisdom is very important. And so you can't build a house during a hurricane. I know some of us have been waiting patiently to see what's happening. And now we're coming into this new space for new ideas, new opportunities, new foundations. None of us knows what the workplace will look like when all of this truly reopens. But I know that we can start working together and communicating to ideate what it could be. Now is the time to take stock. Now is the time to organize. Now is the time to reimagine our communities. Now is the time to reimagine our practices and how to go about building what Martin Luther King called the beloved community of the 21st century. Y'all, we didn't survive 2020. We thrived in 2020. But we can't separate our fights. I know a lot of people say, well, if we focus on race, then we're excluding gender. If we focus on gender, then we're not focusing on indigeneity. And what about this? And what about that? And what about these? And what about those? And the reality is why are they mutually exclusive? We can build this together. We can. This is the work ahead of us. Housing rights, mortgages, the Community Reinvestment Act. These types of things cannot be separated from labor market opportunities or exclusion. Because we know where there's not diversity in the workplace, particularly for high-paying jobs, there's not going to be diversity in mortgage applications for wealth-building opportunities in land. And so we can't separate those things. We have to be intersectional. We know that economic access can lead to economic justice. That financial literacy and programming for financial literacy is really, really important. But if you're only becoming financially literate to manage sub-living wage job salaries, that's not the same thing as financial inclusion to manage living wage salaries to grow livable communities. That's not the same thing. And so we have to push for the latter rather than the former. We know that every single person of color in this country had to face what it means to be policed, not necessarily to be protected, but to be policed. Some people in this country are protected. Other people in this country are policed. We have to reimagine public safety. Because though we can build the companies, that doesn't mean that we'll be able to keep them. Not if we can't keep them safe. The billions of dollars that are lost every year, the families that are broken, the number of women, especially, women are the fastest and largest growing population of people in US jails right now. This must be communicated. This must be understood. And it has to exist as a conversation and an action step for all institutions. We know that legislative support and electoral inclusion are absolutely necessary for any and all of the things I just talked about. From housing to jobs, to policing and public safety, including to voter suppression. I know we all owe a debt of gratitude to people like Stacey Abrams, the number of people that rushed to make sure that our voices were heard. Those are some things that we did. But what's got to stop? I want you to really step back and think, what stops with our generation? Redlining ran through and runs through our generation until it ran into us. Electoral disenfranchisement ran through and runs through this generation until it ran into us. Unaligned collective movements ran through and runs through this generation until it ran into us. Intergenerational division, not leveraging youth for their energy and our elders for their wisdom, has run through and runs through this generation until it ran into us. Nothing will run through us again, except the strategies and the narratives, the funding mechanisms and the resources, the political promises that serve, support, and make real the power of Black social, cultural, economic, and collective spiritual capital. That's what's going to run from and through us moving forward. That's what these next years are about. And so we cannot become what we are here to replace. We are here to replace set-aside funding amounts that are 1 percentage digit long and only 12 months in duration. We gotta, that's done. That's done. And we've got to organize and strategize and be aligned. Like I see the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs and Donna Gambrell and the work she's doing with, people. The amount of work that has been put into building collective power and solidarity cannot be lost in the coming years. And I know people like Donna are fighting to make sure that we don't have set-asides. We have the pie, and we're part of the conversation. We're here to replace those set-asides. We're here to replace the stereotypes about the solutions or the brilliance of Black innovative capabilities as it relates to the ideas and truths that Black entrepreneurs are bringing into this world. We're here to replace the disempowerment of Black futures. In 2014, there was this national youth Black Lives Matter organization called Black Youth Project 100, and they named their ongoing campaign Fund Black Futures. And they wanted to call out the policies and the practices of government that don't serve us, that take away from the funding from the CDFIs, that take away from the funding from financial literacy programs, that take away the supports for technical assistance programs, that ensure that we don't have the capital to put into our communities. They identified those problematic areas of governance and budgetary responses from cities. And they called their movement Fund Black Futures. We need to fund Black futures because all of the strategies are only producing community harm. We're here to replace strategies that are built without us. Nothing for us without us. And no one can be about us who does not understand the importance of working among us. This is our time, y'all. This is our time to move together as people of color, as allies, as advocates, and as accomplices. Because we have to replace the people and the companies who insist on diversity inside, championing diversity, equity, inclusion inside their companies and their organizations. But then those employees, they take their wages and segregate their own cities because they don't want people like us as neighbors, though they demand that they be seen as champions of diversity because they want us as colleagues. If you want to be our colleague, then you have to fight to ensure that there are not policies or financial practices that you explicitly or implicitly support that deny us our opportunity to be neighbors. Real estate is the #1 wealth building apparatus in the United States, and the wealth divide only grew during 2020 because we've organized our national conversation around philanthropy for people of color and investments for people who are not of color. Y'all know it's real. Anyone who's not fit for leadership in the 21st century, doesn't know how to lead through an inclusive lens, who doesn't understand the difference between equity and equality, that's not a 21st century leader. Racial progress cannot move at the pace of white fragility. Black women are one of the hardest working and lowest paid demographics in this nation. including in predominantly Black communities. Now that's a problem, and that has to end. Prison and educational pipelines that only destroy our long-term ability to grow financial and social safety over time, that's got to go. That's got to be replaced with a new and reimagined response to public safety, to organizational safety, to the community commitments that we have to one another. Incarceration rates are directly tied to employment rates. In cities like Milwaukee, up in Wisconsin, the average annual earnings of a person with a criminal record is $249 a year for the bottom 25% of earners, and just over $14,000 a year for those people who are in the top 5% earners. Both of those are poverty level wages. Some of them are extreme poverty. We know the skin color of the people who are most likely holding those wages and coming from those prisons. Y'all, we have to be at the table to inform what is built for us. We also have to build our tables. If you see yourself as an ally in this work about economic freedom and economic justice, then you have to ask yourself, how fast must we go? And how slow can we no longer move? This is no longer, when I say this, I mean this conversation around equity. It is not about people who are uncomfortable having conversations about it. This is about making sure that people who are unsafe are actually accounted for and cared for. This is not about centering fragilities. It's about centering possibilities. It's not about good intentions. It's about good outcomes. Our capital models, our rate of capitalization, our narratives about Black excellence and economic access, they must shift. And BBIF is doing the work to shift, to build, and to remake the social narratives and economic traditions that have undermined and undervalued and materially harmed every Black community in Florida and, in extension, Black people across the country. Now is not the time to let go of the reins we now hold in this time. None of us are responsible for everything, but all of us are responsible for something. Some of our traditions require reform. Other traditions that we have require radical revolution. And I want to just pull out that the word radical, I know a lot of people step away from it. They have some feeling, they feel some type of way about it, so to speak. But you know, the word radical, the etymology of the word just means to the root. And why wouldn't we want our actions to be about the root of a thing? But I know why it's hard to deal at the root, because you know the root's it's in the dirt. It's dark down there. We'd rather deal with the flowers and the petals and the branches. But the root is what creates the possibility for all progress. And so I think we all need to consider not where we can be more assimilating, not where we can be more congratulating, not where we can, you know, perhaps be more digestible, where we can create inflective and catalytic change because we went to the root of the thing, the root of injustice, the root of financial exclusion, the root of what is stalling out progress and slowing down outcomes that our people need. I want to ask you a question to close this out, and I want you to think about this for the rest of the day. Not what is everybody going to do, not what is your organization going to do, but in all that I've just talked about, what is just yours to do? What is yours to do in this work? Think about what you're great at. Think about what people come to you for. Think about the privileges you have. Don't just think about your personal identity. Think about the position you now hold. Yes, I'm Black. Yes, I was born in a low-income community. Yes, my family lived off of $20 a day for 4 boys. Yes, I buried many of my friends. Yes, I believe in mentoring young Black youth. And in Chicago, I buried a lot of them. Yes, I believe in all of those things, but I also am CEO of one of the fastest growing social impact consulting firms in my city. I'm also someone who's blessed to be able to be at the microphone and share space with you all today. And I have to remember the power of my position, not just the marginality of my identity, because then I could also become the problem. If I don't see that I have opportunity and responsibility to make a positive change in this world. And I know some folks might be listening to this and y'all like, man, this man is talking a little too straight. He's a little too direct. He's ruffling a couple feathers, but let's get to the root, right? Let's get to the root. I don't want one more George Floyd in this country. I don't want to see another Mike Brown. I don't want to read another Brookings Institute report on the wealth divide and how little Black people and Black families have. I don't want to see another survey about how Black entrepreneurs can't find access to capital. Now, we can do something about that, y'all. We can do something about that. So what is yours to do about that? Think about it. One thing you can do, donate and invest in BBIF. If you're looking for more ways to buy Black or show your support for Black-owned businesses, consider donate to BBIF's Reverse the Red campaign. Reverse the Red, it's a movement designed to combat the effects of systemic economic disenfranchisement in the Black community by raising funds to support Black-owned businesses. By donating to Reverse the Red campaign, you compound your impact and you invest directly in Black and minority and underserved businesses while also creating an ecosystem for those businesses to thrive. Your dollars don't end with one business. They continue to cycle through multiple businesses under BBIF's model. If you want to know more about it and how you can get involved, you just go to www.bbifreversethered.com. So make sure that y'all go to that at some point today, www.bbifreversethered.com. You can access the link on the Reverse the Red page. It's in your conference guide. And let's make sure that we show solidarity with Black-owned businesses and the many people that support them, like you.